She wore her best dress to the worst moment of her life. Zara Mensah walked through the doors of the most expensive wedding venue in Seoul, saw the man she had loved for 5 years standing 20 feet away in a dove-gray suit, holding a champagne glass like he owned the city, and realized in the space of one breath that the invitation in her handbag was not a mistake, and was not closure, and was not anything she had told herself it was, on the 3 days she spent convincing herself to come. It was a trap, and she had walked straight into it, in a burgundy wrap dress she had ironed twice. Her ex called her a situation in front of 300 people. Then the most dangerous man in Seoul stood up from his chair, crossed the room, and stood next to her without saying a single word, while every security guard in the building took 2 steps back. Welcome to Afro-K Story Hub, the channel where love, culture, and consequence collide in ways nobody sees coming. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, and turn on notifications, because this story is going to keep you here from this sentence to the very last word. Like this video if you felt that opening in your chest. Drop a comment telling us where you are watching from, and stay with us because what happens next will absolutely destroy you in the best possible way. A quick reminder before today's story begins. Many viewers asked where they can find more Mafia boss romances without searching through dozens of videos. That's why I created the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection, featuring 15 complete stories, 20 audiobooks, and 5 exclusive bonus stories not available on YouTube, but only through the collection. If you'd love to enjoy these stories anytime without ads or interruptions, you'll find the link in the description. Now, let's get started. Her name was Zara Mensah. She was 31 years old, Ghanaian, a policy analyst for an international development firm in Yoido, and she had been living in Seoul for 6 years with the particular quiet competence of someone who had built everything she had from nothing and intended to keep it. She was not dramatic. She was not careless. She did not make impulsive decisions. She had ironed the dress twice because she had made the decision to attend very carefully and wanted to show up correctly. She had been engaged to Park Jae-won for the last year of their 5 years together. He had proposed outside Gyeongbokgung Palace in the rain, which she had always thought was slightly too cinematic for a man who was otherwise practical and reserved. But she had said yes because the rain and the palace and the slightly crooked smile on the left side of his face had combined into something she believed completely. She had learned to cook his grandmother's doenjang jjigae. She had sat through 4 New Year's parties with his extended family, practicing Korean phrases with his aunts, while his uncles pretended not to be charmed by her. She had built a life around this man, with the same careful attention she brought to everything she did. 7 months ago, he ended it with a text message. Not a phone call, not a conversation, not even the dignity of a face that had to look at her while it said the words. A text message that said he needed to move in a different direction and wished her well. As if 5 years could be wrapped in 2 sentences and a period at the end, and handed back to her through a screen at 11:45 on a Wednesday night. She had not told her friends how bad the months after were. She had not told her mother back in Accra that she spent entire weekends on the floor of her apartment in Mapo-gu, genuinely unable to get up. She had swallowed it whole and gone back to work, and smiled at colleagues, and said she was fine. She was fine. She was completely fine. And then the invitation arrived 3 days ago, with his name on it, and she had stood in her kitchen holding it for a very long time. She told herself she was going for closure. She told herself she was going because she needed to see the ending properly before she could fully release it. She told herself she was going because she was a woman who did not run from difficult things, and attending her ex-fiancé's wedding was a difficult thing, and she was going to walk through it with her head up and her spine straight and walk back out the other side healed. She had ironed the dress twice. She had told nobody she was going. She had taken the subway by herself and walked the last 3 blocks in heels that were slightly too high, and arrived at the entrance of a venue that was significantly more extravagant than anything she had prepared herself for, and stood there for 11 seconds before walking through the doors. The inside of the venue was not a wedding. It was a declaration. Crystal chandeliers so heavy with crystal they seemed to be daring the ceiling to hold them. White silk on every table without exception. Floral arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly rent. And she paid good rent. Over 300 guests filling the space, men in suits that had been constructed by hand, and women in gowns that had their own names, their own designers, their own histories. Waitstaff moved through the crowd in practiced silence. A string quartet played something European and expensive in the far corner. Zara was the only person standing alone at the entrance, with no escort, no table number, and no idea that every single person in that room who recognized her had been told to expect her. The whispers started within 60 seconds of her walking through the doors. She did not hear them at first. She was scanning the room for a familiar face. Any face she might know from the years when she and Jaewon attended his work events together, and she stood beside him and smiled, and pretended with reasonable success that she belonged in these circles. But the faces she found were not familiar. They were polished and closed, and carrying the specific expression of people who already know how a story ends, and are simply waiting for it to arrive at the part they came to see. A woman in a silver gown leaned toward the man beside her and said something behind her champagne glass. The man looked at Zara. His eyes traveled from her face to her dress to her empty hands and back to her face. He nodded slowly, like something had been confirmed for him. Zara's stomach dropped completely. She was turning to leave. One foot was already pivoting back toward the entrance, her body making the decision before her mind had fully authorized it, when his voice crossed the room and found her. Zara. She stopped. Park Jae-won was 20 feet away in that dove-gray suit, holding his champagne glass loosely, the way people hold things when they are completely at ease, when they own every surface in the room. He looked exactly as she remembered him, and completely different at the same time. His hair was styled with professional precision. His posture was the posture of a man who had prepared for this moment and was comfortable in it. He was smiling. But not the smile she knew. The one she knew was warm and slightly crooked on the left side, and arrived without him choosing it. This one was sharp and symmetrical, and constructed entirely for the audience surrounding him. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up," he said. Loud, deliberate, pitched to carry. "I have to say, this is a little surprising." 300 heads turned. The string quartet kept playing. Indifferent, expensive, completely unbothered. Zara held herself perfectly still, every muscle she had doing the most important work of her life. "I received an invitation," she said. Her voice came out steady. She would be proud of that for a long time afterward. "Did you?" Not a question. He tilted his head with that sharp audience smile. "And you decided to come to my wedding." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. The ripples spread outward visibly. More heads turned. More conversations paused. The string quartet kept playing. Indifferent. Expensive. "I thought perhaps it was sent by mistake," she said carefully. "No mistake," he said. And now his voice had something in it that was cold and practiced and aimed not at her, but at the 300 people around her, using her as the instrument of a performance she had not agreed to be part of. "I just didn't think you'd actually have the nerve to walk through the door. Most people, after a relationship ends the way ours did, understand that means it is completely over." He paused. Let the pause fill with the weight of 300 people listening. "Completely. The way ours did. As if it had been mutual. As if he had not sent her 2 sentences and a period through a screen at 11:45 on a Wednesday and then gone silent for weeks while she unraveled in the apartment 2 blocks from where they had spent 5 years. Someone laughed. One person. From her left. A short, sharp sound like a signal. A few more joined it. Not loudly, not cruelly. Just enough. Just enough to change the temperature of the air. Just enough to make the floor feel uncertain beneath her heels. "You and I had a brief relationship that ran its course," Jae-won continued, his voice smooth and carrying, and meant for every single person in that room except her. "I moved on. I am getting married today to a woman who actually fits this life." He paused again, glanced sideways at a man near him, and they exchanged a look that she was absolutely meant to see. "You showing up here is a little concerning. Honestly, I hope this doesn't become a situation." A situation. She had given this man 5 years. She had learned his grandmother's doenjang jjigae recipe, and made it correctly 3 times before he told her it was good. She had sat through 4 New Year's parties, practicing Korean phrases with his aunts. And they had liked her. She knew they had liked her, because she had watched their faces, and she was good at reading faces. She had believed in what they were building together with her whole self, the full, undivided weight of her. And when the ending came through a text message, she had spent 3 months genuinely unable to function. And now he was standing in front of 300 people, calling her a situation. 2 men in black suits appeared at her elbows. Not roughly, not with any visible aggression, but there, present, positioned. The message was as clear as anything she had ever received, and she had received a very clear text message 7 months ago. She was going to be removed from this room. And then the room changed. Not loudly, not with any announcement, not with any visible signal that most of the 300 people present would have been able to identify. A chair scraped back in the VIP section near the left wall. A single sound that should not have been audible above the string quartet and the ambient noise of 300 guests. And yet immediately after it, 300 people went completely silent. The man who stood was not physically imposing. He was average height, lean, dressed in a suit the color of ink that had no pocket square and no ornamental detail of any kind. He was Korean, mid-30s, with dark hair pushed back from a face that was angular and absolutely still. The stillness was the thing, not relaxed stillness. The deliberate, long-practiced stillness of someone who had trained their face for years to give away precisely nothing. His eyes were dark, and they were doing something that Zara could not immediately name. Not anger, not concern. Something colder and more exact than either of those things. He was looking at her. Not at Jaewon, not at the 2 men in black at her elbows. At her. Only at her. Like she was the only thing in the room that warranted his full attention, and everything else was simply context. His name was Kwon Sung-jin. In the world he occupied, which was not a world most people knew existed, and even fewer people knew how to navigate, that name opened doors and silenced rooms, and made men with very significant resources quietly and quickly reconsider their decisions. He was not famous the way that entertainers or politicians were famous. He was known the way that certain forces are known. Quietly, specifically, by the people who needed to know, and nobody else. You did not seek him out. You tried very hard never to be in a position where he sought you out. And you absolutely did not make a public scene in front of him without first understanding what that choice might cost you in the weeks and months that followed. Park Jae-won did not know any of this. That was about to become the most significant problem of his wedding day. Kwon Sung-jin walked from the VIP section to the center of the room, the way water moved downhill. No urgency, no performance, no concession to the fact that 300 people were watching him. Just movement that was going where it was going, because that was always where it had been going. The 2 men in black suits, who had appeared at Zara's elbows, looked at each other. Then they looked at him. Then, without a word spoken, or a gesture made that anyone watching could have pointed to as a signal, they took 1 step back. Then another. He stopped next to Zara. Not in front of her, which would have made her invisible. Not behind her, which would have made her an object requiring protection. Next to her. Precisely next to her. As if they had arrived at this wedding together, and he had simply been briefly delayed on his way to her side. He looked at her first. His eyes were very dark, and completely unreadable, and the expression on his face gave away nothing at all. But something in the quality of his gaze, the steadiness of it, the absolute absence of any of the performative sympathy or discomfort she had been receiving from every other pair of eyes in that room, did something to the floor beneath her feet, made it feel solid, made it feel like it was actually, genuinely there. Then he looked at Jaewon. Park Jae-won. His voice was quiet, conversational, the kind of quiet that required no volume, because the entire room was already leaning toward it with everything it had. Is there a problem here? Jaewon's expression moved. The first movement it had made all evening that was not entirely controlled. Sung-jin. His voice was different now. Barely, but different. This is a personal matter. The woman was not exactly invited, and security was simply handling it. Sung-jin repeated the phrase slowly. She was not exactly invited. He said it the way someone might hold an object up to the light, turning it, looking for the part that made sense. Is that so? She is my ex-fiancé, Jaewon said. Something was in his voice now that had not been there 60 seconds ago. A careful, small tremor working very hard to stay below the surface. She seems to have difficulty with the concept of an ended relationship. Sung Jin looked at Zara again. Directly. Unhurried. She looked back at him because the rest of her body was fully occupied with the project of remaining upright, and her eyes had nowhere else useful to go. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. The faintest recalibration, like a machine that has received new information and is quietly, efficiently updating. She does not look like someone with difficulty, he said. She looks like someone who was invited to a wedding and arrived. The string quartet had stopped. Nobody had instructed them to stop. They had simply stopped. The way instruments and people stop when the room around them makes continuing feel incorrect. Sung Jin. Jaewon's voice was working very hard at level now. Working hard in the way of a person who has started to understand that something has gone wrong but cannot yet see the full dimensions of it. You know how these situations can be. Emotions. Old relationships. I'm sure you understand. I understand several things, Sung Jin said. And then he turned to Zara and said, in a tone so completely ordinary given the circumstances that it momentarily disconnected her from everything that was happening around her. Have you eaten anything? They haven't served the appetizers yet, but there is something near the bar that I believe is worth trying. Zara stared at him. He looked back at her with complete patience, as if they had all the time available. As if the 300 people watching them were simply part of the general background of the evening. She said. Stopped. Her voice had been steady a minute ago, and now it was doing something at the edges. I don't think I should stay. You haven't done anything wrong, he said, simply, without any decoration, without anything extra at all. So there is no reason to leave. 6 words. 6 words, and they landed in that room, like something load-bearing had been quietly removed from the structure of everything Jaewon had spent the last 10 minutes constructing. The architecture of the humiliation held up for one more second. Then, along the edges where it had been stretched thinnest, it cracked. Park Jaewon's expression did something it had not done once all evening. The 2 security men were still standing 2 steps back from where they had been, looking at the floor, looking at the walls, looking at the middle distance with great attention to nothing. Zara took one breath, not a dramatic breath, not a breath for anyone watching. The kind of breath that is not just air, but a decision made in the lungs and the chest before the mind has fully caught up. She straightened her spine, not dramatically, just correctly. The way a person stands when they have just remembered something true about themselves, that the last 15 minutes had been working very hard to make them forget. She looked at Jaewon one last time. She did not say anything. She did not need to say anything. There are looks that hold everything that years of words could not adequately carry, and this was one of those looks. 5 years, a text message. 3 months on the floor. 4 New Year's parties with aunts who had liked her. A doenjang jjigae recipe she had practiced until she got it right. All of it. Delivered in one look and then finished. Done, set down. Then she looked at Kwon Sung Jin. This stranger in an ink-dark suit who had stood up from his chair in the VIP section and walked across a room of 300 silent witnesses and placed himself next to her with the calm of someone who had simply located something incorrect and chosen to correct it. Nothing more than that. Nothing performed. I suppose I could eat something, she said. And they walked toward the bar together while 300 people exhaled and pretended very hard that they had not just watched something seismic move through that room. The bar area was quieter, not silent, because 300 guests had found their voices again, within approximately 45 seconds. That particular collective exhale that rushes back into a room when a dangerous silence has finally passed. But quieter than the main floor. Quieter in the specific way of a space that has been claimed by someone who does not require noise to establish presence. A dedicated staff member appeared at Sung Jin's elbow before they had fully arrived at the counter, which told Zara everything she needed to understand about how this man occupied space in any room he entered. She accepted a glass of water because her hands were still not entirely under her control, and she did not trust herself with anything that required coordination beyond standing. You don't have to stay near me, she said. Not ungratefully. Accurately. I appreciate what you did, but I'm not actually in danger. I know, he said. Then why did you intervene? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive. He was the kind of person who considered a question before answering it. which was different from the kind of person who delayed answering to seem considered. Because what was happening in that room was incorrect, he said. And I dislike incorrect things. She looked at him. That is a very specific reason. I am a very specific person. She almost laughed. Not because it was genuinely funny, but because the alternative was crying, and she had made the decision in her apartment 3 days ago, while ironing the dress, that she was not going to cry tonight. She had attended this wedding, and she was going to walk out of it intact. That was the plan. She was keeping the plan. My name is Zara, she said. I know, he said. She paused. How? I asked, he said. The way someone states something obvious, without drama or emphasis. When you walked in, before he started speaking, she absorbed this. You asked about me before any of that happened. Yes. Why? He looked at her directly. His eyes were very steady, and she had the disorienting, particular feeling of being seen clearly by someone who did not do anything accidentally. Because you walked into a room where you knew nobody, he said, and you stood at the entrance for 11 seconds without moving, and then you straightened your shoulders and walked in anyway. That is a specific kind of courage. I was curious about what produced it. 11 seconds. He had counted them. Or at minimum, he had noticed the kind of detail that most people standing in a room full of 300 guests would not have registered because they were occupied with their own presence and their own concerns. Zara set her water glass on the bar carefully. I'm his ex-fiancé, she said. In case you missed the announcement. I didn't miss it. And you still intervened. Yes. Most people would have stayed out of it. Most people, he said, are not me. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. Neither of them was performing anything for the other. It was the most honest conversation she had been in the center of in a very long time, and it had been running for approximately 4 minutes with a man she had not known existed before tonight. What do you do? She asked. Because she needed information. Because the VIP section and the security men stepping back, and the staff member appearing before they arrived, and the way the entire room had redirected its attention, the moment he stood, all pointed to a layer of reality she did not yet have the vocabulary to describe accurately. He tilted his head slightly. Various things. That is not an answer. It is an accurate answer, he said. The full answer is more complicated. She should have been significantly more alarmed by that than she was. Any sensible person would have been. But she had just been publicly called a situation in front of 300 people by a man she had loved completely, and she was still standing, still breathing, still holding a water glass with hands that had nearly but not quite stopped trembling. Her alarm was currently at capacity and had been for some time. Are you going to tell me why you were at this wedding? She tried instead. Business, he said. Park Jae-won's new bride has family connections that overlap with certain interests of mine. This wedding is not entirely romantic in nature. He said it without judgment. As a simple statement of fact about how the world worked. Most of what happens in rooms like this is not entirely what it appears to be. Something moved in Zara's chest. Not quite surprise. Something closer to recognition. A piece of a thing clicking into a space she had not known was waiting for it. She thought about the text message. The abruptness of the ending. The way Jae-won had moved on with a speed that had always, even in the worst months, felt slightly wrong. The way the wedding had appeared fully formed from nothing. Extravagant and strategic, and surrounded by people who looked like they were there for reasons that had nothing to do with celebrating love. He didn't end our engagement because he fell out of love, she said. It was not quite a question. Sung Jin looked at her. That, he said quietly, is a very good observation. Don't do that, she said. Do what? Give me half an answer and look at me like I'm warm. Just tell me. A moment of quiet. Then something happened at the very corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The shadow that precedes a smile. The ghost of the intention of one. Park Jae-won ended your engagement because his family entered into a business arrangement that required him to marry into a specific lineage, he said. The bride's family has industrial connections that the Park family has been pursuing for 4 years. A foreign fiancé, however much he may have cared for her, was not compatible with that arrangement. Zara absorbed this the way you absorb information that is devastating, but that some part of you, the part that had been running quietly under everything for 7 months, already knew. Not the specific details, the shape of it, She had felt the shape of it and told herself she was being paranoid. She had not been paranoid. He chose a business deal over 5 years, she said. Yes. And he humiliated me tonight instead of simply not inviting me because, Sungjin said, the invitation was not sent by him. His current bride's mother sent it. A woman who wanted to ensure that his former fiancé would either not come, in which case her absence confirmed her insignificance, or would come and make a scene, in which case her presence confirmed the same thing. He paused. Either outcome served the same narrative. The woman who came before the correct match needed to be made small. Tonight was designed to accomplish that. Zara stared at him. How do you know all of this? She asked. I know most things that happen in rooms I am invited to, he said. It is professionally relevant. She looked at him for a long time. Behind them, the reception had resumed, the low, steady hum of 300 people recalibrating and returning to their champagne and their conversations and their strategic alliances sealed with string music and expensive flowers. Jaewon was somewhere in that room being a groom, moving on officially and publicly from the 5 years he had spent with Zara Mensah, which had apparently been 5 years he had spent with someone who did not fit the arrangement he had always been moving toward. I should go, she said. You should do whatever you want to do, he said. But you are no longer being removed against your will. If you want to stay. She thought about it. She thought about what it would look like to walk back out through those glass doors now. The women in their named gowns watching her leave. The confirmation delivered by her own exit that she had been exactly what Jaewon described. A situation. Someone who could not handle the ending. Someone who had come and embarrassed herself and left, which was precisely what the bride's mother had designed the evening to produce. She thought about what it would look like to stay. She picked up her water glass. You mentioned something near the bar worth trying, she said. Sungjin turned slightly and gestured toward a tray that a waiter had arrived with at exactly the moment it was needed. Galbi Jim croquettes, he said. Unusual for a wedding, but correct. She took one. It was, infuriatingly, exceptional. I'm going to need you to explain several more things to me, she said while chewing, which was not how she usually conducted important conversations, but the evening had long since departed from anything she had planned. I expected that, he said, starting with why any of this is your concern. He looked at her with that steady, completely unreadable expression. Because you had the correct reaction to being treated incorrectly, he said. You stayed still. You did not beg. You did not explain yourself. You did not cry. Something moved briefly behind his eyes. Most people do one of those 3 things. I'm crying internally, she said. I know, he said. But you chose not to let it out. That is discipline. I respect discipline. She did not have a response to that. She took another croquette instead. Behind them, the reception hummed on. Somewhere across the room, Park Jaewon was standing beside his new bride, accepting congratulations and toasts, and the particular kind of joy that 300 wealthy people performed at strategic events, sealed with champagne and carefully chosen flowers. And Zara Mensah was standing at a bar with a man whose full name she had only learned 20 minutes ago, eating Galbi Jim croquettes, and understanding for the first time that the story she had been telling herself about the ending of her relationship was not the true story at all. The true story was colder and more calculated, and in some specific and unexpected way that she was only beginning to locate, more survivable than the one she had been carrying for 7 months. The night moved the way difficult nights do, slowly at the center and fast at the edges. Zara stayed at the bar for 20 minutes, that felt like 2 hours, and 2 hours that felt like 20 minutes. And in that span of time, she learned 3 things about Kwon Sung-jin. The first was that he did not waste words. Every sentence he produced had been edited before it left his mouth, and the result was that everything he said landed with a precision that was slightly unnerving. She had met efficient people before. She had not met someone who was efficient with language, the way other people were efficient with surgical instruments. The second was that he was watching the room the entire time they spoke. Not rudely, not obviously, but his awareness of the space around them never dimmed even when he was looking directly at her and speaking directly to her. She had the feeling of being in the presence of something that did not have an off switch, something that was always running even when it appeared to be still. The third was that he was funny. Not in a way he announced. Not in a way that required setup or timing, or any of the performance that usually accompanied humor in people who knew they were funny. He was funny the way very dry terrain could suddenly produce a spring. You were not expecting it, and when it arrived, it felt both surprising and like it had always been there. She had said something about the croquettes being an odd wedding choice, and he had said, without inflection, that they were not odd, they were aspirational, and the difference between odd and aspirational in Korean wedding catering was approximately 80,000 won per head, and she had laughed before she had decided to. She did not know why she was laughing. The evening had been catastrophic. Her ex-fiancé had called her a situation in front of 300 people. She had been nearly physically removed from a venue. She was standing at a bar with a stranger who had identified himself as involved in various things and declined to elaborate further. None of this was funny. And yet, "Tell me about the 5 years," he said. She looked at him. "Why?" "Because you walked into this room carrying it," he said. "And I think understanding it matters." She almost said no. She almost said that she did not owe him her history, and that the fact that he had intervened earlier did not purchase access to her interior life. All of that was true. She was preparing to say it when she realized something. She was not tired of talking about it the way she had been tired of not talking about it. She had spent 7 months carefully not discussing Jaewon with people who cared about her, because she did not want to be managed or pitied or advised. This man in the ink-dark suit was none of those things. He was curious, in the detached and precise way of someone conducting research rather than offering sympathy. For some reason, that was easier. "We met at a conference," she said. "International development. I work in sustainable agriculture policy." He was there, representing his family's investment firm. He spoke excellent English. He was charming in a specific way. The kind of charming that makes you feel seen rather than entertained. That is a rare combination. "It is," Sung-jin agreed. "We dated for 8 months long distance. I was in Accra. He was in Seoul. Then I got a job offer here, and I took it, and we were together properly. For 5 years." She looked at her water glass. "He talked about marriage from the 2nd year. He was the one who brought it up. He was the one who introduced me to his family. His aunts taught me recipes. His mother and I had our differences, but we were working on it. I thought," she stopped. "I thought we were building something." "You were," Sung-jin said. He didn't think so, apparently. "He did think so," Sung-jin said. The business arrangement came later. His family's financial situation changed 2 years ago in ways that made the alliance with the bride's family extremely attractive. The personal relationship became secondary to the structural necessity. He looked at her. "That does not make it less of a betrayal. It only means the betrayal had a reason, which is its own particular kind of terrible." She absorbed this slowly. "You really do know a great deal about things." "I told you," he said. "Right, various things." A brief pause. Then, from somewhere in the room behind them, raised voices. Not loud enough to cause alarm, but distinct enough to cut through the string quartet's current endeavor. Zara turned. Near the main entrance, 2 men in suits were having a conversation that was trying very hard to look casual, and failing. One of them was looking in Sung-jin's direction. The other had his phone out and was speaking quietly into it. "That looks like it is about you," Zara observed. "It is," Sung-jin confirmed. He had not turned to look. He appeared to have processed the information through some peripheral awareness that operated independently of his primary attention. "Is that a problem?" "For them," he said. "Probably." She looked at him. "Are you going to tell me what is actually happening?" He turned to face her fully. His expression remained entirely calm. "Jaewon's father-in-law-to-be has realized who I am," he said. "He is now concerned about what my presence and my conversation with you implies, about his family's standing and my opinion of how this evening has been conducted." Zara's eyes widened slightly. "And what does it imply?" "Whatever I choose it to imply," Sung-jin said. She stared at him. He looked back at her with that absolute steadiness. "You are," she said slowly, "a much more complicated problem than I initially understood. Most people realize that eventually," he said. "How long does it usually take them?" "Longer than you," he said. And that was the second time the almost smile happened at the corner of his mouth, and Zara made a mental note of it, because she had the feeling it was rare, and therefore meaningful, in the way that rare things were always meaningful. Jae-won appeared from the crowd at this point, which was brave or foolish depending on your perspective. And given that his father-in-law-to-be was already in a quiet panic in the corner, it was probably the second one. He was still holding his champagne glass. He was still wearing the expensive suit, but the sharp, symmetrical smile was gone. What remained in its place was an expression Zara had not seen on his face before. Calculation mixed with something that might have been concern. He stopped at a respectful distance, which was new. "Sung Jin," he said carefully, "I hope there hasn't been any misunderstanding this evening." "There has been no misunderstanding on my part," Sung Jin said pleasantly. "Of course." Jae-won's eyes moved briefly to Zara, and then back. "I'm glad you're enjoying the reception. It's a beautiful venue," Sung Jin said. "The croquettes are excellent. Whoever chose them made a correct decision." There was a pause, where nobody said anything, and the string quartet filled the gap with something that was technically beautiful and emotionally irrelevant. "I want to be clear," Jae-won said, and now there was something in his voice that was working very hard to remain light. "That whatever Zara may have said about our previous relationship, things between us ended cleanly. She understood that." "She told me nothing about your previous relationship," Sung Jin said. "I asked her about the 5 years because I was curious." She answered honestly. He paused. One small pause. Perfectly placed. She is, in my observation, someone who answers honestly. That quality is harder to find than most people acknowledge. Jae-won was very still now. "I owe her an apology," he said, and the way he said it made absolutely clear that he did not believe this, but understood that saying it was the safest available option. "That is between you and her," Sung Jin said. "I have no position on what you do or do not owe her. I have a position on how guests at events I attend are treated." He looked at Jae-won with the same calm expression he wore for everything. "I prefer not to attend events where guests are publicly diminished. It reflects poorly on the host." Jae-won's jaw moved. "I understand," he said. "Good." Sung Jin turned back to Zara, and in the same tone, as if Jae-won were simply no longer relevant, "The main course should begin soon. Would you like to stay for it, or would you prefer to leave now and eat somewhere that doesn't have a string quartet?" The "somewhere that doesn't have a string quartet" broke Zara in the best possible way. She put her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. She managed to contain most of it, but the rest of it escaped around the edges, in a sound that was partially a laugh, and partially the release of 7 months of grief, doing something that looked, from the outside, like the most inappropriate possible reaction to the most complicated evening of her adult life. Jae-won stared at her. Sung Jin watched her laugh with an expression that finally, fully, became a smile. Small, real. The kind that arrives when something has happened that was genuinely not expected. "Somewhere without a string quartet," Zara managed. "Yes. Absolutely yes. Please." Jae-won stepped back. The conversation was over, and all three of them knew it, but he was the only one who felt it land. They collected their things, which in Sung Jin's case was nothing because he traveled apparently without luggage of any kind, and in Zara's case was a small clutch purse that contained her phone, her transit card, and a tube of lip balm. They walked toward the exit. The 300 guests watched them go. Not obviously, not rudely, but every pair of eyes in that room tracked them to the glass doors, and through them and out into the Seoul night. Park Jae-won stood in the middle of his own wedding reception, watching his ex-fiancé leave with the most dangerous man in the building, and understood, with the particular clarity that arrives too late, that something in his carefully arranged life had just shifted in a direction he was not going to be able to control. The car was black and large, and appeared at the curb with the same quiet inevitability as everything else in Sung Jin's world. A driver was already out, and opening the rear door before they had fully descended the entrance steps. Zara looked at the car. She looked at Sung Jin. She thought about every reasonable caution that a person in her situation should exercise. Then she thought about the last 7 months. She got in the car. "Before we continue, a quick note for everyone who loves these mafia boss romance stories. I've bundled 20 of our most loved Afro-Korean romance stories into the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. You'll get all 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, plus 5 exclusive bonus stories you won't find on YouTube. If you'd love to enjoy these stories anytime without ads or interruptions, you'll find the link in the description below. The interior was exactly what she expected. Clean, spare, no visible ornamentation. The kind of space that communicated wealth not through decoration, but through the quality of what was there. The leather, the silence, the way the door closed with a sound like a vault. She sat with her hands in her lap and watched Soul slide past the windows as the car moved into the evening traffic. "Where are we going?" she asked. "A restaurant," he said. "Nothing formal. You've had enough formal for one evening." She could not argue with that. They were quiet for a few minutes. The comfortable kind of quiet. Which was remarkable, given that they had known each other for approximately 90 minutes and had met in the middle of one of the most publicly uncomfortable situations she had ever been in. She thought about that, about how easy the silence was, about how unusual that was. "Why were you really at that wedding?" she said. He looked at her. "I told you. Business. You told me the surface of it," she said. "You're very good at answering questions accurately without actually answering them." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise. More like the recognition of a thing that had happened. "The wedding was a ratification of an arrangement," he said slowly. "Jaeswan's father-in-law controls distribution infrastructure in the southern manufacturing corridor. I have interests that overlap with that infrastructure. My presence tonight was a signal that I am aware of the arrangement and have an opinion about it." "And what is your opinion of it?" "I had not formed one before this evening," he said. "I am forming one now." She thought about that. "Because of what happened with me." He did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Attend events and form opinions that have consequences for other people?" "Yes," he said simply. "And what happens to the people your opinions are about?" He looked at her, very directly. "That depends on the opinion," he said, "and on what they have done." Zara looked out the window. The Han River appeared briefly between buildings, its surface catching the city lights and holding them, beautiful and dark and full of depth that the surface did not reveal. "I don't want anything bad to happen to him," she said. "Interesting," Sung Jin said. "I loved him for 5 years," she said. "The fact that the ending was what it was does not erase the 5 years. I don't want revenge. I just wanted to walk out of that room without being called a situation in front of 300 people. And I managed that thanks to you. And now I want dinner, and then I want to go home, and start actually moving forward." He was quiet for a moment. "You are," he said, "genuinely unusual." She looked at him. "Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation," he said. "But yes." The restaurant was in Insadong, and was the kind of place that had no sign outside, and a door that required a specific knock or phone call to open, and where the person who seated them appeared to know Sungjin well enough not to need words, and to understand that what he needed was a table in the back corner where they could speak without being observed. They were seated in 4 minutes. Menus appeared. Tea appeared. Then the menus were gently removed, because apparently Sungjin had already arranged the meal in advance, which Zara found either impressive or alarming, and eventually settled on both. "You called ahead," she said. "I called ahead. From the venue? From the car." She looked at him. "While we were in the car. I sent a message," he said, "while you were looking out the window at the river." She had been looking at the river. He had been managing logistics. Of course he had. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I am a perfectly capable adult who has been living in Seoul for 6 years and can feed herself and navigate her own life. I appreciate what you did tonight, but I am not someone who needs managing." "I know," he said. "Then why are you managing everything?" "Because I wanted to have dinner with you, and I wanted it to be good," he said. Simply, directly, without any of the elaborate scaffolding that people usually put around that kind of statement, to protect themselves from the risk of being direct. He just said it. Zara sat with that for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Because you are interesting," he said. "And I don't meet interesting people often enough to waste the opportunity when one appears." She looked at him across the small table. The restaurant was warm and lit with the kind of light that made everything look slightly more significant than it was. Warm and low and amber. Or maybe everything actually was significant tonight. She was not entirely sure she could tell the difference. "Ask me something," she said. "Something real, not background information." He considered this. What do you miss most about who you were before the relationship ended? It was a better question than she expected. She thought about it properly. Not the first answer, but the actual answer. My certainty, she said finally. I used to be certain. Not arrogant, just sure of my direction. The ending made me question everything backwards. Not just him. Everything before him. Every decision I made. Everything I believed was true. He nodded slowly, like he understood that specifically. What did it feel like? She asked. When you stood up in that room tonight. He looked at her. Correct, he said. It felt correct. She held his gaze. Just that, he confirmed. Something incorrect was happening in my presence. I corrected it. He paused. The fact that you were there made it personal. But even if you had not been, I would have found it difficult to remain seated. She thought about what kind of person that made him. She thought about the word dangerous, and how it was attached to him in the air of that wedding venue, in the way certain words attach themselves to certain people without needing to be spoken. She thought about the driver and the car, and the restaurant in Insadong, and the message sent while she was looking at the river. She thought about the fact that she was not afraid of him. She probably should have been more afraid of him. You're going to tell me at some point, she said, what various things actually means. Probably, he said. And when you do, I may have significant concerns. Almost certainly, he agreed. And you're comfortable with that. I am comfortable with honesty, he said. Whatever follows from honesty is preferable to what follows from the alternative. The food arrived. It was extraordinary. She told him it was extraordinary, and he looked briefly, genuinely pleased in the way that people looked pleased when something they had selected was well received. And she thought that under all the stillness and the precision and the various things, there might be a person who simply wanted to have a good dinner with someone interesting, and found that more humanizing than she had anticipated. They talked through 3 courses about things that had nothing to do with Park Jae-won, or the wedding, or the 5 years. She told him about sustainable agriculture and what it actually meant in practice, and he asked questions that were specific and well-informed enough that she eventually said, "You know about this area. I have agricultural holdings in the southern region," he said. "The soil degradation problem is significant." Of course he did. Of course he had agricultural holdings. He told her about traveling to 6 countries in 40 days the previous year because of an arrangement that required his physical presence in each location. He made it sound like a long commute. She asked if that was normal for him. He said he did not entirely know what normal was for him anymore, which was the most unexpectedly human thing he had said all evening. By the time the tea came for the second time, Zara had been sitting in that restaurant for 2.5 hours, and the evening had transformed so completely from what it began as, that she had to remind herself, deliberately and with some effort, that she had walked into a wedding at 7 o'clock tonight, in a dress chosen to look healed, and she had been called a situation, and she had nearly been removed by security, and now she was here. Having tea, having actually had a good time. Life was genuinely strange. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes. What happens now? With Jae-won, with the business arrangement, with whatever opinion you said you were forming." Sung-jin looked at her. He set his cup down with the same deliberate care he brought to all his movements. "The opinion I have formed," he said, "is that Park Jae-won is a man who made a calculated choice, and was not honest about it, and who then handled the consequences of that choice by diminishing someone who did not deserve it." He paused. "In the world I operate in, that kind of behavior has a reputation, and reputation has consequences. I told you I don't want anything bad to happen to him," she said. "I heard you," he said. "What I am talking about is not punishment. It is simply the natural result of information being correctly categorized. The people who do business with Jae-won's new family will know who is involved in that arrangement. They will know what kind of judgment is being exercised. That affects decisions. That is all." Zara thought about that carefully. "You do things very quietly," she said. "Yes. That is more frightening than someone who does things loudly." The almost smile again. "Most things that matter happen quietly," he said. She looked at him across the tea, and the amber light, and the end of the strangest evening of her life. She thought about the 11 seconds he had counted at the entrance. She thought about the message sent while she watched the river. She thought about him standing up from his chair in the VIP section while 300 people watched and 2 security men stepped back. "Thank you," she said. For tonight. For all of it. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression was different from everything else she had seen on his face. Quieter. Less processed. You thanked me already, he said. I know, she said. This is a different thank you. The first one was for the intervention. This one is for the dinner. And for treating what happened to me tonight like it was worth treating seriously. He held her gaze. It was, he said. And you were. She paid her half of the bill, which he initially objected to, and then, when she looked at him, did not object to further, because he appeared to be a man who could recognize when an argument was already over. They left the restaurant at 11:30. The Insadong street was quiet. Seoul breathed around them, warm and complex and full of the particular energy of a city that never entirely stops. The car was waiting. She did not know how the driver knew they were finished, but the car was waiting. I would like to see you again, he said. Not as a question, not as a demand, as a statement of intent delivered honestly. Zara looked at him. She thought about all the reasons she should say thank you and goodbye, and go home and process this evening from a safe distance. She thought about 7 months of very careful distance. She thought about closed doors and walls built out of grief, and the way she had stood at the entrance of that venue for 11 seconds before deciding to walk in anyway. I work in Yeouido, she said. I usually have lunch near the park on Thursdays, when the weather is good. He looked at her. This Thursday? The weather is supposed to be good, she said. She got in the car. He did not follow. The driver took her home. She sat in the back and watched the city go past and tried very hard not to think about the fact that she was already looking forward to Thursday and completely failed. This is the point in the story, family, where you need to drop everything and comment. We want to know, are you Team Zara trusting this man or Team Zara run while you can? Because what happens next is going to test both positions in ways you are not prepared for. Like this video if you felt that ending of Batch 2. Stay with us, because we are about to go somewhere entirely unexpected. The week between the wedding and Thursday moved through Zara's life in 2 distinct registers. During the day she was the person she had always been. Organized, focused, producing the kind of work that her supervisor described as quietly excellent, which was both a compliment and an accurate description of how she operated. She attended meetings. She reviewed agricultural policy frameworks. She sent emails that were appropriately thorough. She was, by any external measure, absolutely fine. In the evenings, she was a different kind of project entirely. She sat in her apartment and thought about things. Not in the spiral way she had been thinking in the months after the breakup, that particular exhausting loop of what did I miss and what could I have done differently and why was I not enough. That loop had been silenced by something Sung-jin had said at the restaurant. Not any single sentence. The aggregate, the complete picture of that evening, which had replaced the internal narrative she had been running with something more accurate and considerably less self-blaming. She thought instead about what she knew and what she did not know, and what the difference between those 2 categories meant for the decision she was apparently making. What she knew. His name was Kwon Sung-jin. He attended strategic events for business reasons. He operated in a world where his presence alone changed the behavior of security personnel and caused men to reconsider conversations mid-sentence. He paid close attention to things most people did not notice. He was precise and funny and occasionally disarming. He had stood up for her in a room full of people who were watching her humiliation like entertainment. What she did not know, the full nature of various things. The extent of his reach. Why, specifically, she interested him. What a man who operated at his level wanted with a policy analyst who ate lunch near Yeouido Park on Thursdays. She called her friend Adayeze on Wednesday evening, which was something she had been meaning to do all week, but kept postponing, because she knew how the conversation was going to go. Adayeze picked up on the second ring and said immediately, "Tell me about the wedding." "It was eventful," Zara said. "My contact, who was there, told me Jaewon publicly humiliated you," Adayeze said. "Which means I need his address." "You don't need his address," Zara said. "I need it for a card. A strongly worded card." Adayeze. "Okay, fine. Tell me what actually happened," Zara told her. Not the abbreviated version she had been preparing. The actual version. From the burgundy dress, to the glass doors, to the whispers, to what Jaewon said, And then what happened after? She told her about Sung Jin, standing up from the VIP section, and the two security men stepping back and the almost smile at the corner of his mouth, and the Galbi gym croquettes, and the restaurant in Insadong, and the 11 seconds. When she finished, there was a pause. Okay, Adeze said. So, there is a man. I didn't say there was a man. Zara. You described his facial expressions in detail. There is a man. He is a very complicated situation. They always are, Adeze said. What kind of complicated? The kind where various things is his answer to what do you do, and everyone in the room knows who he is, by sight, and security personnel physically back away when he approaches. Another pause. Zara, Adeze said. I know. That is a very specific kind of complicated. I know. And you have agreed to have lunch with him on Thursday, near Yuyuido Park, where it is public, where there are many people. So you have thought about the safety implications. I think about everything, Zara said. That's true, Adeze said. You're the most systematic person I know. A pause. Does he know that about you yet? Zara thought about the question he had asked at the restaurant. The real one. What do you miss most about who you were before? He might already know it better than most people who have known me for years, she said. Adeze made a sound. That, she said, is either wonderful or deeply concerning. It might be both, Zara said. It is definitely both, Adeze said. Be careful, and also tell me everything immediately after Thursday. Thursday came with good weather, as promised. She walked to the park at noon in a shirt that was somewhere between casual and deliberate, which was the specific combination she had been aiming for, and found a bench near the east side entrance that had a view of both the path and the river, and sat down. He was already there. He was sitting on the far end of the bench she had apparently selected, without knowing he had already selected it, reading something on his phone, with the complete focused attention he brought to everything. He was wearing something less formal than the wedding suit. Dark trousers, a plain shirt, no jacket. He looked different without the formality, and also exactly the same, which said something about the fact that the formality was a layer, rather than a character. He looked up when she arrived. He did not say, I was here first, or look at your watch, or perform any of the small social rituals that people use to establish footing. He simply said, good weather. I told you it would be, she said, and sat at the other end of the bench. They ate the things they had each apparently brought with the same instinct. No restaurant, no performance, just food from nearby places. He had something from a Pojung matcha cart. She had rice and vegetables from the place 2 streets over that she went to every Thursday. It was warm enough. Did you think about it? He said. She did not ask what he meant. Yes, she said. And I have questions, she said. Many questions. Some of which I suspect you will answer accurately, but not completely, and some of which you will answer completely, and I am going to have to learn which category each question belongs to before I can evaluate the answers. He looked at her. The almost smile arrived. That is, he said, an extremely precise framing. I work in policy, she said. Precision is a professional habit. Ask your first question, he said. She thought about it. Not the one she had prepared. The actual first question. Why did you count the 11 seconds? He looked at the river for a moment. Because I noticed you, he said. And when I notice something, I pay attention to it properly. Counting is how I know I am paying proper attention and not just looking. She absorbed this. And when you pay proper attention to something, she said, what do you usually find? Usually information, he said. Useful or otherwise. And with me, he looked at her. Not the processing look. The actual look. Something I was not expecting, he said, which is unusual enough to be significant. She held his gaze. I need to know what various things means, she said. Not the whole picture, but enough that I understand what I am actually dealing with. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I manage interests. Some of those interests are conventional. Real estate, manufacturing investment, distribution infrastructure. Some are less conventional. Facilitation of arrangements between parties who cannot approach each other directly. Information management. The kinds of things that require trust between people who operate at significant levels of risk and consequence. Facilitation, she said. Yes. And information management. Yes. And the less conventional side of those activities. she said carefully, involves things that are not legal in precise technical terms, he said, but that operate by a clear code and do not involve causing harm to people who have not chosen to participate in that world. She thought about that very carefully. She thought about every reasonable conclusion a person should draw from that statement. She thought about Adaisy saying that is either wonderful or deeply concerning, and about Adaisy being right about it being both. I am a policy analyst, she said, who works in the public sector, who is audited annually, whose professional reputation is extremely important to her career. I know, he said. Then you understand that this, she gestured between them, is professionally complicated for me in ways it is not for you. Yes, he said. I understand that completely. And you are telling me this now rather than later. Because you asked me to be honest, he said. And because I told you that I value honesty over the alternative. And because you deserve to have the full picture before you make any decision about whether this is something you want to continue. He looked at her. I will not be offended if your answer is no. I would find it frustrating, but I would respect it. She sat with that for a long time. The park moved around them. People walking dogs, a child on a bicycle, the river doing what rivers did. Indifferent and beautiful and continuous. I am not saying no, she said. Something in his face shifted. But I am also not saying yes to everything, she said. I am saying that I am interested in understanding what this actually is, clearly without pretense, at whatever pace makes sense, and that I am not available to be anything other than what I am in the process. What you are, he said, is exactly what makes this interesting. She looked at him. Is it? Not skeptically, genuinely asking. You sat in a restaurant for 2.5 hours with a man you had just met, under extraordinary circumstances, he said, and at the end you paid your half of the bill and told me what days you ate lunch in the park. That is not performance. That is character. He paused. Character is rare. I have been in rooms full of powerful people my entire adult life, and I encounter genuine character approximately once every 3 years, if I am fortunate. Zara looked at him. She thought about what it cost a person to say something like that. She thought about what it cost to be honest about what you were, and what you were looking for in a context where dishonesty would have been both easier and safer. You are, she said, either the most genuine person I have met in a very long time, or you are the most sophisticated version of something else entirely. I know, he said. You will have to decide which over time. That's a long game. I play long games, he said. I am good at them. She looked at the river. I need you to understand something, she said. I spent 7 months in pieces after someone I trusted decided I was not the correct choice for his life. I am not fully reconstructed yet. I am not available to be someone's next decision that gets reversed when it becomes inconvenient. I don't make decisions that I subsequently reverse, he said. It was a simple statement. It had the quality of something that had never needed to be said before, because it was simply true. She looked at him. That is a significant claim. I know. How do I verify it? Time, he said. And observation. The same way you verify anything real. She took the last bite of her rice. The park continued its business around them. Somewhere nearby, a child was explaining something to a parent with the passionate specificity of someone who has just discovered an important fact and needs the world to acknowledge it immediately. Zara felt something in her chest that she recognized and that startled her slightly with its arrival. Not love. Nothing that dramatic. Something quieter. The specific warmth of being in the presence of a person who saw you correctly and was still there. Same bench, she said. Next Thursday. He looked at her. Next Thursday, he agreed. 3 weeks after the wedding, a man came to Zara's office building. She did not know about it until afterward. He arrived at 9:45 on a Tuesday morning and spoke to the reception staff and identified himself as a representative of a private advisory firm conducting due diligence research. He asked general questions about the organization's partnership with international development stakeholders and then, specifically and carefully, asked about whether any staff members had personal connections to Kwon Sung-jin. The receptionist, who was thorough and cautious in the way of someone who had received training on exactly this kind of inquiry, did not answer the specific question and reported the visit to her supervisor within the hour. The supervisor reported it to the deputy director. The deputy director sent a message to Zara at 11:15, asking her to come to his office when she had a moment. She was sitting across from him by 11:20. He was a cautious man who had spent 20 years in international development and had the particular calm of someone who had weathered significant institutional turbulence and emerged with all his careful habits intact. He told her about the visit. He described the questions. He watched her face. She kept her face exactly where she needed it. "Do you know what this is about?" he said. "I attended a social event recently," she said. "I met someone there who may have some profile in certain circles. I don't have a professional connection onto anyone named in that inquiry." He looked at her for a moment. "A personal connection," he said. "An acquaintance," she said. "A recent one." He thought about that. "Zara," he said, "you are one of our strongest analysts. You have a record here that we are very proud of. I don't want to see anything complicate that." "Neither do I," she said. "If there is something in your personal life that may create professional exposure, I would rather know about it early than late." "I understand," she said. "What was described to me sounds like a fishing exercise more than a genuine inquiry, but I will be appropriately careful." He nodded. "Let her go." She walked back to her desk and sat down and stared at her screen for 4 minutes without seeing it. Then she took out her phone and sent a message. "Someone came to my office today asking questions about whether I have a connection to you. I need to talk to you." His response came back in under 2 minutes, which was faster than she had expected and somehow exactly as fast as she should have expected. "I know. I was informed an hour ago. I'm sorry. This is J1. She stared at the message. Then she typed back, "Is this going to be a problem for my job?" His response, "Not if I handle it correctly, which I will. Are you available this evening?" She sat for another moment. Then, "Yes." He picked her up from the lobby of her building at 7. Not the large black car this time. Something smaller and less conspicuous. He was driving himself, which startled her slightly because she had not imagined him as someone who drove himself anywhere. He looked at her face when she got in and said, "Are you angry?" "I am concerned," she said. "There is a difference." "There is," he agreed. He pulled into traffic. "Tell me exactly what was said," she told him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for 30 seconds, which was 30 seconds of the particular quality of silence she had learned to read as active processing rather than absence of response. "It was not J1 directly," he said. "It was his father-in-law, a man named Han Dong-cheol. He has been trying for the past 3 weeks to understand what my presence at the wedding implied for his arrangement with the Park family. When he found out I had left the reception with you, he concluded that you were a variable he needed to understand." "I am not a variable," she said. "I am a person with a career." "I know," he said. "I told you that this would become complicated. I am sorry that the complication arrived at your workplace." She looked at him. "What are you going to do about it?" "Han Dong-cheol and I have a shared interest in the distribution infrastructure I mentioned," he said. "He needs my cooperation for a specific aspect of that infrastructure. I am going to make it very clear to him that any further inquiries related to you will result in my withdrawal from that cooperation. And that will stop him." "Yes," Sung Jin said. Simply. She thought about what that actually meant, about what kind of position a person needed to be in for a statement like that to simply work, about the world that produced that level of leverage and what living in it required. "This is not going to be simple," she said. "No," he said. "It won't. And you knew that from Thursday." "I knew it from the bench," he said. "Which is why I told you everything I told you. Because you deserved to understand what you were making a decision about." She looked out the window. They were near the river again. She seemed to end up near the river in every significant conversation she had with this man, which felt like something, but she was not prepared to name it yet. "My career means everything to me," she said. "I built it from nothing. I am the reason my mother can retire comfortably. I am the reason my younger sister had options. I did not come to Korea to build something and then have it dismantled because of someone else's choices." "I know," he said. "So if this," she gestured between them again, "that same gesture from the park bench, creates sustained problems for what I have built, I cannot continue it, no matter what else is true." He looked at her. His expression was completely serious and completely present. "That is the correct position," he said. and I will not put you in that position. I promise you that." She believed him. That was the thing that both surprised her and did not surprise her at all. She believed him. Not naively, not without registering all the ways it could still go wrong, but the same way she had believed him when he said you haven't done anything wrong in the middle of that wedding hall. She believed this too. They drove for another 10 minutes in comfortable silence. "He knew," she said eventually. "Jaewon. He knew from the beginning that the ending was about the arrangement." "Yes," Sungjin said. "And the text message. The I need to move in a different direction. He took the path of least confrontation," he said, "which is a specific kind of cowardice." She thought about that for a long moment. 7 months, she said. 7 months I thought there was something wrong with me, that I had missed something, done something, been something incorrect. She paused. "And the whole time it was a business arrangement." "Yes, that is," she said, and stopped, because the English language did not have exactly the right word for what it was. Then she found it. Infuriating. Sungjin looked at her sideways. "It is," he said. "And do you know what is additionally infuriating?" she said. "Tell me." "That I understand it," she said. "I understand how those worlds work. I study the interface between economic interests and human behavior for a living. I know that business arrangements of the type you described produce exactly these kinds of outcomes. I understand it structurally, and it is still infuriating on every other level. Understanding something and not being hurt by it," he said, "are different capacities. That is," she said, "the most accurate thing anyone has said to me in approximately 7 months. The almost smile again. More complete this time. Almost a full one. "You should do that more often," she said. He glanced at her. "Do what?" "Smile properly," she said. "Not the shadow of one. The whole thing." He looked at the road for a moment. Then he smiled. Actually and fully. It changed his face completely. Opened it. Made him look younger and significantly less like someone who could change the temperature of a room by standing up. He looked, briefly, like a person. "Better," she said. "No one has ever asked me to do that before," he said. "That is unfortunate," she said. "You should be asked more often." He was quiet for a moment. "You are," he said. "Continually surprising." "Good," she said. "Predictability is deeply boring." He laughed. An actual laugh. Brief and real and slightly startled. The laugh of someone who was not expecting it. She added it to the list of things she was keeping track of, without officially acknowledging she was keeping track of them. They ate at a small place in Mapogu that he had clearly been to before and that treated him with the warm familiarity of somewhere he was known, rather than the careful deference of somewhere he was feared. And that was different enough from everything else she had seen around him that she noticed it and felt it was important. "This is somewhere you actually like," she said. "Yes," he said. "I come here when I want to be somewhere uncomplicated." "You don't have many uncomplicated places." "No," he said. "Not many." She thought about that. About what it cost to be someone whose presence changed rooms. About what it might mean to find a place or a person who did not change when he arrived. Over the following weeks, things developed the way real things developed. Not in dramatic leaps, but in the accumulation of small true moments. Thursday lunches at the park bench. One evening a week. That was sometimes dinner, and sometimes a walk. And once, memorably, a complete disaster of an attempt by Sung Jin to help her install a bookshelf that ended with the bookshelf on the floor and both of them on the floor next to it. And Zara, laughing so hard she could not speak. He was catastrophically bad at furniture assembly. She told him this. He agreed, without any apparent damage to his self-concept, that yes, this was an area in which he had significant limitations. She told him it was genuinely comforting to find an area in which he had limitations. He said he would have assembled the bookshelf correctly if she wanted to be less comforted. She said she would take the laughter. Han Dongcheol's inquiries stopped within 10 days of Sung Jin's conversation with him. The deputy director received a formal withdrawal of the earlier inquiry, with an apology for the misunderstanding. He mentioned it to Zara. She thanked him and returned to her desk and sent one message. It stopped. "Thank you." His response. "Of course." Jaewon reached out once. A message to her personal number 3 weeks after the wedding. Short and carefully worded. "I wanted to apologize for what happened. I was not fair to you. Not for the ending. And not for what I said that night. I hope you are well. She read it 3 times. Then she showed it to Sung Jin on Thursday at the park bench. He read it. He handed her phone back. What do you want to do with it? He said. I don't know yet, she said. What do you think? I think, he said, that this is yours to decide, and you will decide it correctly. That is not an opinion, she said. My opinion, he said, is that he owes you more than a message. But I also think that what you said to me the night we left the reception was true. The 5 years existed, and what you choose to do with the apology belongs to you. She thought about that for the rest of Thursday. On Friday morning she replied to the message with 2 sentences. Thank you for saying this. I hope the rest of your life is genuinely good. Then she put her phone down and made coffee and went to work. She told Adaizi about all of it on a Saturday call that lasted 2 hours and covered everything from the furniture assembly disaster to what she actually felt when she looked at Sung Jin across park benches and dinner tables and the floor of her apartment with a collapsed bookshelf between them. It's real, Adaizi said. It's complicated, Zara said. Can I ask you something? Adaizi said. Yes. When you are with him, she said, do you feel like yourself? Zara thought about it, about the certainty she had described to him at the restaurant, the thing she had lost after the breakup, about the 11 seconds at the entrance, about the version of herself that had gone to that wedding in a burgundy dress and had nearly been destroyed by it, and had walked out intact instead. More myself than I have in a long time, she said. Adase was quiet for a moment. Then be careful, she said, but don't run. 8 weeks after the wedding, on a Tuesday evening in Zara's apartment, with the bookshelf now correctly assembled by a professional she had hired specifically because the alternative was another Sung Jin adjacent disaster, he told her something. He had been looking at the shelf for a moment, the books arranged in the system she used that was partially alphabetical and partially thematic and partially instinctive in ways she could not fully explain. And he said, without any particular preamble, I haven't been in a relationship in 9 years. She looked at him. 9 years is specific. It was a specific ending, he said. Someone who was in my world. It ended badly, which means in my world it ended with consequences I was responsible for and did not anticipate. He paused. I decided afterward that I would not put someone else in that position. She waited. That was a decision I made, he said, from a particular understanding of my life and what it required. I am finding that understanding incomplete. She looked at him very carefully. Why? Because you are here, he said. Simply. And because you already know what my life is, and you have not run from it. And because I have watched you for 8 weeks make decisions that are consistently correct, and I find I want to be around the kind of person who makes consistently correct decisions. That is a very analytical reason to want someone in your life, she said. It is also not the whole reason, he said. She held his gaze. What is the rest? He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I counted 11 seconds because I could not look away. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, Seoul did what it always did, continuous and layered and indifferent. The bookshelf stood correctly assembled behind them. I know what I'm walking into, she said. I know it's complicated. I know there are parts of your world I am never going to be comfortable with, and parts that are going to require me to hold 2 completely contradictory truths about you at the same time. Yes, he said, and I know that I am someone who needs honesty the way other people need air, she said. No managed answers. No accurate, but incomplete. The full thing, even when the full thing is difficult. I know, he said. That is why I am telling you about the 9 years. She thought about the woman she had been 7 months ago, sitting on the floor of her apartment, unable to get up, trying to understand an ending that had been handed to her in a text message with no explanation. She thought about the woman she had been the night of the wedding, shaking in a burgundy dress chosen to look healed. She thought about 11 seconds and almost smiles, and Galbai gym croquettes, and 2.5 hours in a restaurant in Insadong, and Thursdays in the park, and laughter on the floor next to a collapsed bookshelf. I'm not running, she said. Something happened in his expression. All the stillness and the precision and the control was still there. But underneath it, reaching the surface for the first time, something else. the specific unguarded quality of a person who has been careful for a very long time and has just, carefully, chosen to be something other than careful. He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. The same deliberate, unhurried attention he brought to everything, her hand in his. Simple, decided. Good, he said, quietly, the same way he said everything that mattered. And Sol went on outside the window, and the bookshelf stood correctly in the corner. And Zara Mensah, who had walked into a wedding 8 weeks ago in a dress chosen to look healed, and had walked out of it actually beginning to be, held on. Besties, we have reached the end of this story, and we need a moment. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Did you see that ending coming? Did Zara make the right call? And what do you think happens when the complication of Sung Jin's world eventually knocks on her door again? Because you know it will. We want every thought you have. If you enjoyed this story, imagine having 20 more unforgettable Mafia boss romances ready to read or listen to whenever you want. That's exactly why I created the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. Inside, you'll find 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, and 5 exclusive bonus stories that aren't available on YouTube. You can get instant access through the link in the description. Like the video if Sung Jin standing up from that chair made you feel something in your chest. And subscribe to AfroK Story Hub, because we have more stories coming that will keep you here, from the first word to the last. Stories about love that arrives unexpectedly, about dignity that refuses to be taken, about people who choose each other even when the choice is complicated. That is what we do here. We will see you in the next one. Don't go anywhere.